I saw a post about Real Madrid fans coming out to say that Barcelona did not actually need the signing of Rodri, that it was a signing that was made to stop Real Madrid from having him. That ideology, that statement is a very wrong statement. It is a very wrong statement because Barcelona actually needed Rodri more than Real Madrid needed Rodri. Now, let us start from what is the role of Rodri? Rodri is a natural defensive midfielder. Although he can play as a central midfielder, but his main role is a natural defensive midfielder. And now what has been Barcelona's major problem in years? Since the departure of Busquets, even before the departure of Sergio Busquets, Barcelona were looking for a defensive midfielder. And so, when Busquets left Barcelona, there was Frankie de Jong. Now, Frankie de Jong is not a defensive midfielder. Frankie de Jong is a box-to-box midfielder, a central midfielder. He only tries to adapt to the role of a defensive midfielder, which whenever he plays as a defensive midfielder, you can see the lapses in his game. During the later stages of Sergio Busquets' time at Barcelona, that was during the last stages of Xavi Hernandez's career as Barcelona coach, Barcelona were looking for a defensive midfielder because Sergio Busquets was no longer effective in that role. Hansi Flick came to Barcelona. When he came to Barcelona in his first season, you notice that Hansi Flick used Marc Bernal and Marc Casado. If you can remember, in that match against Man City in the preseason, that was Hansi Flick's first season. Then, when the season started, it was Marc Bernal that he chose as his defensive midfielder until Marc Bernal got injured against Atletico Bilbao, the hamstring injury. Then, Hansi Flick now relied on Frankie de Jong and Pedri as a double pivot, or Frankie de Jong and Marc Casado as a double pivot. So Barcelona was looking for a defensive midfielder that suits the profile of a Barcelona defensive midfielder, because Barcelona don't play the kind of football that other teams play. And one of the core positions in Barcelona is the defensive midfield. So Barcelona had the problem of replacing Sergio Busquets. That is why Barcelona did not always play with a single pivot. It was always double pivot. Either Frankie de Jong and Pedri or Marc Casado and Pedri. Now, that was in Hansi Flick's first season. Now, his second season, that is last season, you notice that Marc Casado was poor. He didn't perform up to the standard anymore. It was now either Eric Garcia and Pedri, or Pedri and Frankie de Jong, but it was always a double pivot. To show you how Barcelona was lacking in the defensive midfield position. For most times in matches last season, it was always Eric Garcia and Pedri in the defensive midfield, because Frankie de Jong was in and out in injuries. It was always Eric Garcia and Pedri. Barcelona were suffering from the defensive midfield position. They lacked a good defensive midfield position. They lacked a good defensive midfielder. Even against Atletico Madrid, Marc Bernal, that's at the Champions League, Marc Bernal was injured in that game. It was Eric Garcia and Pedri that played as the two double pivots. Even in the return leg, it was Gavi and Pedri that played as the double pivot. Hansi Flick did not have a natural and a good enough defensive midfielder. If you compare it to Real Madrid had Tchouaméni, or Real Madrid have Tchouaméni. Tchouaméni is a natural defensive midfielder. He's a very good defensive midfielder. They also have Edouard Camavinga, also a defensive midfielder, and can play as a central midfielder. So, when you compare the signing of Rodri to Barcelona or to Real Madrid, you understand that it is actually Barcelona that actually need him to play as a defensive midfielder, because Barcelona don't have a natural defensive midfielder, someone that can play that Busquets role. Marc Casado is about to leave the club. Marc Bernal is still young. So they don't have a defensive midfield. The problem of Real Madrid midfield is the central midfield role, not the defensive midfield. They need a good central midfielder, someone that plays similar role as Toni Kroos. Because since the departure of Toni Kroos, Real Madrid has not replaced him from the market. So Real Madrid don't need a signing like Rodri. They needed a signing like Toni Kroos kind of player, a central midfielder, someone in the likes of Neves of PSG, or Sandro Tonali that went to Tottenham. Not a defensive midfielder. Understand this very well. Why I'm doing this video is because a lot of Real Madrid fans are saying that Barcelona signed Rodri not because they needed him, but because it was a panic buy so that Real Madrid will not have him. No, it is actually Barcelona actually needed Rodri more than Real Madrid actually need him. Real Madrid needs a central midfielder, and why Real Madrid really need a central midfielder as Neves or Sandro Tonali is because of Jude Bellingham. Yes, you see, attacking midfielders like Jude Bellingham, Fermin Lopez, Cole Palmer, that usually overcommit, they always leave space behind in the midfield. So they always need a very good central midfielder that can cover for them, that can detect the tempo of matches, that can connect the midfield and the attack, and can also build up play from the defense to the midfield. That was the role Toni Kroos was playing at Real Madrid. And that is why ever since the departure of Toni Kroos, Real Madrid they are looking as if they are terrible. It's because they don't have a good player to replace Toni Kroos. And Rodri is never the man to replace Toni Kroos. Rodri and Toni Kroos are different profiles of players. Rodri is an out-to-out defensive midfielder. Real Madrid needs a very good central midfielder, and the signing of Bernardo Silva solves a bit of that problem. Just that Bernardo Silva is past his peak years. If it was when Bernardo Silva was a bit younger, still active in the game, then I would say yes, it's a good signing. But Bernardo Silva is past his peak years. In highly intense game, Bernardo Silva will be exposed. What Real Madrid needs is a central midfielder. That is why Bellingham and Adagula cannot play together, because Adagula is more of an attacking midfielder than a central midfielder. And Bellingham is also an attacking midfielder than a central midfielder. Real Madrid needs a player like Pedri. Yes, they need a player like Declan Rice. They need a player like Ruben Neves. They need a player like Sandro Tonali. Those are the kind of players that Real Madrid need in their midfield. Players that offer similar football that Toni Kroos did, offering stability to that Real Madrid midfield. So don't get it confused. Barcelona needed Rodri, and don't be surprised if Barcelona actually win the Champions League this season, because that was one of their missing puzzle to make their squad elite. If Rodri was in the match against Atletico Madrid at the return leg, Eric Garcia would not get the red card. Barcelona would have completed a remontada against Atletico Madrid. So get this and know this very well. Know the difference very well. Subscribe.